or evidence that suggests any votes were changed?
I have nothing generated by the National Security Agency, sir.
Director Comey, do you have any evidence at the FBI that any votes were changed in the states that I mentioned to Admiral Rogers?
No.
No, none. Comey also noted that, in fact, it's happened before, and Russia will try to interfere in the 2020 election. And by the way, if you read the tea leaves here, the investigation seems to now be focused on specific individuals. And let me emphasize, not President Trump. Now, of course, the Democrats, they didn't mention that today. Instead, they're pushing the false Russian narrative lie. Watch this.
Most important, we do not yet know whether the Russians had the help of U.S. citizens, including people associated with the Trump campaign. Many of the Trump's campaign personnel, including the president himself, have ties to Russia and Russian interests.
This committee, of course, is engaged in an investigation about links, as you said, between the Trump campaign and the Russians, should there be any possible collusion.
Can you say with any specificity what kind of coordination or contacts you're looking at in your investigation generally?
All right. So if influencing elections of foreign countries is so awful, so horrible, where were all of these Democrats back when President Obama was trying to influence the Israeli elections? Now, let me remind every one of you hypocrites in Congress and all you liberal snowflakes out there that, in fact, a congressional investigation found that back in 2014, an Israeli political group used 300,000+ taxpayer dollars from the Obama State Department in a grant to create a political apparatus to try and defeat our closest ally in the Middle East, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. What a bunch of hypocrites. Here with reaction, Circa News investigative reporter Sarah Carter. All right. The first thing I got out of this, I said, you go, Sarah, you go, John, because everything you've been telling our audience for 2 weeks was validated today. Let's start there.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we talked about the fact that the FBI had conducted a traditional investigation into Trump's server that was located outside of Trump Tower, and that they found no evidence of criminality at all in the server, the pings that were reported between his server and the Russian bank. We also talked about the FISA and that there was an overall investigation into Russian hacking. This proved out to be true. And I want to bring up something that you just talked about, Sean, that's so important. There's also no evidence, according to our sources, of any collusion between Trump or his team and Russia and the Russian hacking. So we've seen that from Senator Grassley. We've seen it from Chairman Nunes. We've heard it from Clapper. We've heard it from numerous other sources, people who support Hillary Clinton, like former acting CIA acting director Mike Morrell, who all have said there is no evidence to date to support that. But that was one of the things that was not answered at the hearing.
You know, and the Destroy Trump media is very interesting how they spun this thing today. The FBI wouldn't confirm that the tweet of Donald Trump about wiretapping by the Obama administration. Interesting. Wiretapping and surveillance technically are two different things, but I would argue we may be parsing words. Nobody asked if the Trump server at any point was surveilled. The Trump Tower server was surveilled at any point by any law enforcement, and whether or not James Comey knew it. Wouldn't that be the better question to have asked?
Yeah, I think that would have been the better question to have asked. And it goes way beyond that. Okay, physical wiretapping of Trump Tower. Okay, that's what they've said. That's the evidence. Even Nunes came out and said, okay, there is no evidence of physical wiretapping at Trump Tower. But remember, Chairman Nunes went further. He said, but was there surveillance in general? Was Flynn the only one? We know for a fact that people had unmasked Flynn's name in his conversation with the Russian ambassador, and that leaked. Was that the only name? Are there more names out there? How many people saw unredacted transcripts of phone conversations between Trump and his associates and foreign leaders? Because remember what the FISA covers, Sean. Right. It covers the foreign leaders. So anytime President Trump, back then candidate Trump, made a phone call to a foreign leader or spoke to them, was that viewed by others? I mean, that's something that Chairman Nunes and others want to know.
You know what's sad is that the director of the FBI, who doesn't comment on ongoing investigations, well, he commented on an investigation that you've been reporting on for 2 weeks. That, in fact, there were 2 warrants issued. One was FISA, one was non-FISA. And it was not against Trump, but it was into the Russian influencing or attempt to influence the election. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. In an ancillary area, when it did, they looked into the Trump server. They found nothing. He didn't say that today. Why? And how important is that for the public to know?
Well, he's very limited on what he can say because the DOJ gives him those parameters, right? The Department of Justice says these are the parameters in which you can disclose this information. And maybe because the report isn't closed yet, the investigation is still ongoing, he didn't answer those questions. What we do know, and I've contacted the DOJ, I asked them, is there an investigation into the leak? Have you given permission for the FBI to investigate that leak? They would not answer me either way. But we do know from the sources we've been speaking to.
Why are they selective in what investigations they're willing to comment on when they don't comment on investigations?
Exactly. I mean, that's a very good point, and they won't answer that. But what we do know is, according to our sources at the FBI and on the Hill, they have not been given that permission yet.
Last question. The real story is seeming to move in a political direction. Where are we in terms of that?
Well, we are continuing to investigate that. I mean, I think the biggest question here is, was intelligence politicized? How was it politicized? And when we're looking at the FISA, what are our rights?
Is it possible top intelligence people, Trey Gowdy went through the list of people that would have had access to this information, especially after Executive Order 12333 was expanded to 16 other agencies, naming specific names. Now, Trey Gowdy's never lost a case as a prosecutor. I assume he was setting the table for future investigations and questions that would directly relate to who knew what when.
Yeah.
Of the names that he listed. True or false?
He mentioned, true. I mean, he mentioned Susan Rice. He mentioned Ben Rhodes. He mentioned Director Brennan. I mean, there is a list of people.
And there could be a top intelligence leak. And that is the issue. And that's the felony we know that was committed. Right?
That's correct. That is correct. But whether it's investigated, we just don't know if it's going to go that far.
All right. Great work, Sarah. We'll continue. We've been way ahead of the curve. We've been telling people for 2 weeks. They're not listening yet. Thanks for being with us. This is a Fox News alert. Air Force One has just arrived at Joint Base Andrews. President Trump is traveling back from his rally in Kentucky. Joining us now with more, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. I want to stay on this issue and how wrong the media has it in so many different ways. We've been reporting everything with John Solomon and Sarah Carter for 2 weeks. You heard my opening monologue. What is your reaction to it?
I thought today showed the best contrast of all, Sean. You have an 8-month-long investigation on Russia with nothing to show for it, and Donald Trump in office for just 2 months with so much to show for it. He just had his rally in Louisville, Kentucky, promising to make good on uprooting and repealing and replacing the most intrusive, invasive, expensive, and expansive law entitlement that we've had in generations. And he's making good on that promise just this week by negotiating, by listening, by improving and making progress on the bill with leaders in the House and the Senate, and of course our governors who control the Medicaid dollars. And so I think the contrast is really remarkable. I love the way President Trump defied all the negative noise inside the Beltway by going to Kentucky and putting a very positive, optimistic message out there for all to see. The positive, optimistic message that he delivered in Louisville tonight really matches the markets, the stock market, the consumer confidence, a 12-year high in confidence among home builders, according to a report last week. And so he matches a lot of the mood of this country that's not being reflected, that's not being covered, because it's negative, negative, negative. But look, I mean, the unmasking of an American citizen through these intelligence leaks should concern everyone. I think we learned about that today. And, you know, again, I would just repeat, we've had 8 months, and I'm not sure that we've advanced the ball at all.
I know he had a really good meeting, and he was able to win over through some of the changes he negotiated with the Republican Study Committee. I spoke earlier tonight to some of the members of the Freedom Caucus. They're not there yet. They would have enough votes to stop it in the House. Senator Paul, a few other senators on their side, they want more changes. The president wants a vote by Thursday, or Paul Ryan, who we'll talk to in a minute, wants a vote by Thursday. You convinced that'll get done?
Yes, the president and vice president have really leaned in on this, and they're confident that we'll get the votes. And as you just intimated, some changes have been made to the legislation. That's
Even
what
tonight,
leaders
yeah.
do. That's right. They listen, they negotiate, they find out what's in the best interest of everyone and what's possible. And some things can change, some things can't, frankly. But the president made a really good point tonight in his rally in Louisville, Sean. He talked about this Thursday getting the health care repeal and replacement done, getting that vote in the House. And then he said we're going to move on to taxes soon, and then we're going to tackle drug pricing. And the president's own words tonight were, some people say getting the cost of drugs down and medicines is just as important as tackling health care altogether, because this is really something we hear from people all over the country. It's just damaging the everyday affordability of life, and it's why people found that the original Affordable Care Act was neither affordable nor sustainable.
The two solutions that make the most sense to me, number one, medical savings accounts, which I've advocated for years, and the second, I keep putting this guy from Wichita, Kansas on radio and TV. His name is Dr. Josh Unger, Atlas MD, $50 a month per adult, unlimited care, concierge care, $10 a month for a child. He negotiates directly with the pharmaceuticals, 95% discount, literally a 98% discount for x-rays, MRIs, every procedure, broken leg, stitches, all taken care of. Add a catastrophic plan, semi-high deductible, and you're fully covered. God forbid you get cancer, heart attack, or a bad accident. It's so simple in so many ways. Is that all going to be in this bill by Thursday? That's what I want to know.
The president, as a non-politician who appreciates free market solutions, private solutions, listens to accounts like that. And that's the whole point here, is that when you have top-down government-run health care that people are forced to purchase on or pay a penalty, a tax essentially, you don't even listen to examples like the one you just related and relate regularly to your audience. There are so many great best practices out there in the free market, and this president is somebody who's listening to that and putting it in there. But people we feel confident. I was up on Capitol Hill tonight with our Director of Legislative Affairs, Mark Short. We met with members of the Republican conference. Folks are on Capitol Hill constantly. People are over to the White House, as you know. They're working the phone. So this is a very collaborative process, and it's one that I think you really see the leadership of the president and the vice president, where they did not delegate or abdicate the details to anyone else. They've been fully involved, and along with Speaker Ryan and of course Leader McConnell and the leadership in both chambers.
I got to tell you, and Dr. Umber, in his case, he was able to duplicate this in 1,000 other practices around the country, and there's so many new paradigms that'll emerge. It'll be fascinating to see that change for the better for people that now can afford health care and have a better plan, and competition will do that. Kellyanne, we love having you. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sean.
Welcome back to Hannity. So tomorrow morning, President Trump will travel to Capitol Hill to meet with Republican lawmakers about the GOP's plan to replace Obamacare. Earlier tonight, during his rally in Kentucky, the president, well, he said this.
Finally, we want a very big tax cut, but cannot do that until we keep our promise to repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. Obamacare has been a complete and total catastrophe, and it's getting worse and worse by the day. And yet you watch the fake media, the fake news, and they try and build it up. It's a disaster, fellas.
All right, joining us now is the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is with us. Mr. Speaker, always good to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Thanks for having me, Sean. Good to be with you.
So you want to vote, we expect to vote Thursday on the health care bill, and I saw progress, a lot of progress on Friday. Let's start with the good news. And, for example, the White House, the option to impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients, block grant Medicaid. I know that was important to the Freedom Caucus members. And also the measure, which I think is interesting, is that the White House and House leaders are also increasing the tax credits. Some people don't like that aspect of it. Where do you stand now? Do you think you have the votes right now to pass this bill?
Yeah, I feel very good, because what we've been doing this entire process, Sean, has been listening to our members, finding out where the consensus is, and making improvements to the bill as we've gone through the legislative process. As you know, it's a 4-committee process. In the Budget Committee, there was an effort to say, let's look at work requirements. Let's look at even more federalism for Medicaid, something very important to conservatives. There already is a per capita block grant, but some governors were saying, let me just take the whole thing in a block grant. And that's what a lot of conservatives were asking for as well. And that's something we figured out we could